Last evening, 10 Democratic presidential candidates participated in a 7-hour CNN climate crisis town hall. We will discuss the prophetic implications of this meeting on today's edition of End of the Age. Turn that screen on. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with Endtime Ministries. Thank you for joining me on this edition of End of the Age. Now, you've heard me say it many times, but I'm going to say it again today. Man-made global warming, which leads to climate change, is a hoax. You say, well, hold on a minute, Dave. Every news station is saying that it's real and that it's one of the existential problems of our time. I'm telling you, it's a hoax. Look at it like this from a biblical perspective. Genesis 8:22. The Bible says, while the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, summer and winter, and day and night shall not cease. So the earth, according to Scripture, is never going to heat up to the point where it's destroyed because of man-made global warming. It's not going to happen. There's always going to be a summer and a winter, cold and heat. And you know, you've heard about it in the news. Are you worried about glaciers melting and causing the oceans to rise and flood your home? It's never going to happen. Ecclesiastes 1 verse 7 says, all the rivers, think about the Mississippi, the Amazon, the Euphrates, all the huge rivers in the earth. The Bible says all the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. Unto the place from whence the rivers come, thither they return again. Folks, since the beginning of time, water has run into the seas and into the oceans. I mean, think about how much water the Mississippi flows from the Mississippi flows into the Gulf down here. And yet, you would think, man, this thing would be full and fill up and come up onto the land. Doesn't happen. Because since the beginning of time, these rivers, huge rivers, have run into the seas and the oceans, but it evaporates and then it rains and snows on the land to start the process all over. It's happened since the beginning of time. And it's going to continue to happen. It's how God created the earth and established everything and created everything to function. All the rivers flow into the oceans and the seas. It evaporates, goes and does it again. It's just a continuous cycle. It's been doing it for thousands of years. But yet, there are people that would like to scare you to death. You've heard the scare tactics of the socialist left concerning man-made global warming, which leads to climate change. Are you scared yet? It's a question you need to ask because you're hearing it on every news source. You know, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she tweeted this concerning Hurricane Dorian. She said, this is what climate change looks like. It hits vulnerable communities first. So now we've got climate change producing hurricanes that is choosing which communities it wants to hit first. And then she says, I can already hear climate deniers screeching. It's always been like this. You're dim. She goes on to say, no, this is about science and leadership. We either decarbonize and cut emissions, or we don't and let people die. Folks, this is all a hoax, and there is an agenda driving this. And we'll get into that very deeply before this program's over with. Now, the CNN town hall on climate change. You've heard about it. It was a 7-hour town hall where the top 10 presidential Democratic candidates they gave their, proposed ideas and their propaganda on what they would do to stop climate change. The only one that can change climate change is God, who created the climate. He makes the sun come up every day, and He makes the sun to go back down. It's God that causes that to happen every day. But I watched many of these interviews last night during the town hall, and over I heard the term that climate change is an existential threat. Existential, if you don't know what that means, has to do with the existence of man. So they're saying this is threatening our existence as mankind. It's an existential threat. And you say, well, that's a fear tactic. It absolutely is. It's a fear tactic based on a hoax. And after watching several of those Q&A sessions in the town hall, I thought, we've been down this road before, actually many times. And I tell you what, I know I'm going to come up to a break here. I don't want to cut this short because you got to hear this. But it's about Y2K. You remember Y2K back in 99, 2000? Well, I'm going to tell you our experience here at Endtime with Irvin, Baxter, and some things that happened during that time. It was another existential threat, but it ended up nothing happened. So we're going to talk about it and get off deep into this meeting last night when we get back from the break. So join me then. Don't touch that dial.
We've seen Bible prophecy fulfilled like never before. From the halls of the United Nations to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, Endtime Ministries continues to reveal the Bible prophecy in the news headlines around the world every day. Whether it's through our broadcast or online at our Jerusalem Prophecy College, your gifts enable us to put vital materials in the hands of those who need it most. Because of you, we continue to replace fear with faith in the hearts of Christians around the world. We will continue to see prophecy come to pass at an even swifter pace. We need your support. Your donation of any amount enables us to continue to broadcast and be a voice in the ever-growing censored media. To become a partner or give a one-time gift, visit endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME right now. That's 800-363-8463. Go online now. Visit endtime.com.
Have you had a longing to visit the cities where Jesus healed, ministered, and taught every day? Judy and I would like to invite you to travel to the wonderful land of Israel. Experience the Word of God in vivid color while walking down the roads of the Holy Land with us.
When you are ready to experience Israel, we recommend you travel with Endtime Ministries. You will not only experience historical and present-day Israel, you will also learn about the prophesied future to come. It's as if we traveled back in time to visit a different era and discovered ourselves in an ancient time. The tour is very well organized, the accommodations are first class, and the food is delicious. If you have ever had a desire to visit Israel, there is no better time than now. Ann from Colorado.
To sign up to receive your Experience Israel 2019 packet, call Adrian or Jana at 1-800-ENDTIME or go to endtime.com. We can't wait to experience Israel with you.
So when we're talking about existential threats or threatening the existence of mankind, we've been through this many times, folks. Now, obviously, when you're talking about nuclear weapons or something like that, now that's an existential threat. We start throwing those things off, then you're talking about threatening millions and millions of people's lives. But there have been times when people have talked about existential threats and nothing happened. Back in 99, there was an existential threat that was going around called the Millennium Bug, or Y2K, the year 2000. And there were a lot of people that, and I know a guy, the guy who laid the carpet in Endtime Ministries, in the latter part of 98, 99, he sold his business, sold everything he had, lock, stock, and barrel, went to Colorado, bought a huge property and set trailers up there, and people started moving into those trailers. I mean, he had like a trailer court going, and when 2000 came around, nothing happened. The guy lost everything he had. Plus, he had a lot of people mad at him because he got them to buy into it. So what happened here at Endtime Ministries? Well, we wanted to make sure that we were telling everybody, or at least Irvin Baxter was. I wasn't here at that time. And Irvin Baxter wanted to make sure he was telling everybody the truth. So he set off and did all kinds of research. And it led him, now we're talking about the year 2000, but if you can see me, the ones that are watching on social networking, I'm holding up the January, February 99 issue of that year, and it said, Y2K, will the lights go out? So you know and I know that many were speculating that on January 1, 2000, many of the world's computers would not know whether it was January 1, 1900 or January 1, 2000. And of course, it was broadcast that many of them would crash, bringing necessary services such as electricity, gas, water to a sudden halt. And that banks would close, airplanes wouldn't fly, telephones wouldn't work, hospital life support systems would fail, food storages would develop. And these developments were supposed to result in mass riots and utter chaos across the globe. But Irvin Baxter wanted to know the truth at that point, because we had many people calling us going, hey, is this the end of the world? What's going on? Is this all going to fail? And so what happened at that time, Irvin Baxter, and in the magazine, you could read it if you had a copy. I don't think we even have any of these left. This is just one of the very few. Irvin Baxter interviewed, because they were saying, hey, the electrical grid's going to go down. There's 3 electrical grids in the United States, one in the east, one in the west, and then Texas has its own electrical grid. So Irvin Baxter interviewed several managers of power plants at that time in the latter part of 98, and every single one of them told us that the Y2K was going to be a non-issue. Because they had thoroughly inspected their systems, and it was simply not going to affect them, that there would be no electrical outages. We had one guy that told us, even if there was, for some weird fluke, that we had an electrical outage, that they had diesel generators that could power everything back up very quickly. They were prepared for it. So he said it's not going to, if they did have an electrical outage, it wasn't going to be very long. Well, of course, we now know nothing happened. We also had interviewed train yard engineers and different things, these managers of these huge train lines. And every one of them told us that they had manual overrides in case of an emergency. It wasn't like a chip was going to fail and trains were going to be running over people and running into towns and this, that, and the other. They said, we've got manual overrides for all of that. Now, the media was saying there's no manual overrides. There's going to be utter chaos throughout the world. And a lot of people were very, very scared. It was called at that time an existential threat. Well, after that, in late 98, early 99, Irvin Baxter and Endtime Ministries started reporting that nothing was going to happen. And of course, nothing did. Well, I feel the same way about this global warming climate change hoax. We're kind of in the same situation here. According to MSN, more than half of these, when we're talking about this forum or this town hall meeting that happened last night, more than half of those 10 presidential candidates, they're Democrat, at that forum, they openly embraced the controversial idea of putting a tax or a fee on the carbon dioxide pollution. Now, there was a lot of things they got into, and knowing that it was based on a hoax, as I sat there and watched this, I saw them try to explain some things. None of them gave facts on how global warming leads to climate change and this is happening, this, that, and the other. They were just proposing their plan to handle the problem, this supposed crisis. And they also proposed, all of them, multi-trillion-dollar plans to combat climate change, along with a host of other issues. I mean, Bernie Sanders' plan is over $16 trillion. That's with a T. And even they went as far as Kamala Harris. She followed the release on Wednesday of her 10 million climate change plan and it aims for carbon neutrality economy by 2045 with a pledge to end the Senate's filibuster. If she was president, in order to get a new Green Deal passed, she said that she would abolish the Senate's filibuster to get a new Green Deal passed through. Now, boy, that sounds like somebody that I want to run out and vote for, right? Well, the Real Clear Politics said that the Green New Deals are just the same as the old socialist con game, and it's very, very true. I went through some of these presidential candidates' Green New Deals, Bernie Sanders, many of them, and they're built around socialistic principles. So the allure of the Green New Deal, it can be summed up in 3 words: other people's money. Some of the specifics included in the resolution sponsored by the House in Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's New Green Deal and Senator Ed Markey. And what they have in common is that they represent all of the Green New Deals being proposed, they represent massive redistribution of wealth, which is a major plank of socialism. And it's important to remember that only a handful of the proposals in the Green New Deal involve climate change. I mean, I went through Bernie Sanders and I was surprised at how just a small portion of that deals with climate change. And they're simply, these are the fig leaves, covering up the naked socialist takeover of the U.S. economy that's being proposed. I mean, in these new Green Deals, you can look for this: free college, free home remodeling, massive federal investment in mass transit and other infrastructure, guaranteed high-paying jobs for everyone, free health care, free housing. I mean, in Bernie Sanders' $16 trillion plus Green New Deal, it actually states this, and you can go on this website and look. It says New Green Deal. He says we must guarantee health care, housing, and good-paying jobs to every American. We will greatly expand the National Housing Trust Fund to build the units necessary to guarantee housing as a right to all Americans. Now, this is in his supposed deal to handle global warming and climate change, but yet he's talking about these socialistic principles of wealth redistribution. And this was all throughout the CNN town hall that happened last night. There were 7 hours of it. But once you know the propaganda and what the agenda is behind it, I could see that weeded as a thread all the way through every one of the candidates. Now, when we get to Beto O'Rourke, he proposed actually cap and trade legislation. Now, this is according to CNN, the town hall. Beto O'Rourke said that he backs a carbon cap and trade program in which a shrinking number of allowances would be sold to polluters each year. And he said it's the best way to send the pricing signal to ensure that there is a legally enforceable limit. Now, of course, he's the former Texas congressman, and he said that at the town hall last night. He said we should certainly price carbon, but I think the best possible path is to do it through a cap and trade system. He said there will be allowances granted and sold to polluters. And he said that there would be a set of number of allowances that would decrease every single year. So let me explain that right there, because you need to understand this, because this is wealth redistribution. According to the Smithsonian, the basic premise of cap and trade is that the government doesn't tell polluters how to clean up their act. In other words, this is not going to solve the proposed or the propaganda of global warming, which leads to climate change. It's not going to solve that. Instead, it simply imposes caps on the amount of emissions from a factory, let's say. And each company starts the year with a certain number of tons allowed, a so-called right to pollute. And the company decides how to use its allowances. Let's say 20 tons of carbon emissions. And then they decide how they want to use that. They could either restrict the output and come under that 20, or switch to a cleaner fuel, buy a scrubber to cut emissions. And if it doesn't use up its allowance, then it could sell what is no longer needed. But again, it might have to buy extra allowances on the open market if it was emitting more than what they were allowed. And each year the cap ratchets down, and the shrinking pool of allowances gets costlier. But the problem is, this does nothing to solve climate change. If a company can afford to keep buying credits, then they can keep the emissions rolling. But the thing is, that's not the goal of the leftist or the people pushing this. That's not their goal. They could really care less because they know that global warming, which leads to climate change, is a non-issue. Hear me? I don't care what all the news sources are saying. Global warming, which leads to climate change, is a non-issue. Okay? I'm in a great relationship with the individual that created all of this, okay? His name is Jesus Christ. He created all this. He's keeping all this stuff going. I don't have to worry about it. The Bible says you seek Him first in His kingdom, and all these things, you don't have to worry about all the rest of this stuff. You have a relationship with Him, everything else is going to be all right. You don't have to do the fear tactics of these politicians that are trying to get more control over you. You understand how they could control the economy if they had a noose around all of our factories. Now, some of you remember that Al Gore proposed the same thing. And of course, he's been proven wrong so many times, I don't even know if we could count them all. His Inconvenient Truth movie, all of the predictions he made in there, of course, they haven't come to pass. I mean, it's embarrassing. But he proposed this cap and trade legislation, and he speculated that global warming was being generated by mankind's modern industrial development, which has increased the amount of CO2 emissions in the atmosphere. And his solution, Gore advocated global laws that would revolutionize our lifestyles, redistribute the wealth of the world through this proposed cap and trade legislation, and establish a system of global governance that would end national sovereignty. That's where it would lead. And one of the core belief systems of socialism, many of you already know this, is that the most conflict in society stems from an ever-broadening gap between the wealthy and the poor. Now, this is their theory, and the contention is that the wealthy are the ruling class and will inevitably use their economic power to enforce their will upon the less fortunate. And the ultimate socialistic solution to this problem is to abolish private property ownership, for the state to own all principal means of production, with the central government redistributing the wealth evenly among the masses. And the result would be a classless communistic society where a global government would ensure equality for all citizens. Now, if you don't think that's the goal behind all this global warming, climate change stuff, why do they call themselves democratic socialistic, or why are they all promoting socialism now? They're openly promoting it. Progressivism, all of that stuff is socialistic. Because that's what they're trying to do here. There's an agenda driving this propaganda that's coming from the United Nations, this global warming, climate change propaganda. And this is all prophetic. We're talking about a one-world government here. But it would be impossible to fully realize the dream of this communistic one-world government without the redistribution of wealth from the developed nations to the poor, underdeveloped nations of the world. And this is the main goal of the global warming, climate change hoax. The United Nations elites know that a perpetual global life-threatening crisis is necessary to convince wealthy nations to accept these punitive cost of cap and trade taxes, which when I heard Beto O'Rourke say that last night, I thought, you've got to be kidding me. He's following in the footsteps of Al Gore and many others. But they won't say cap and trade legislation is wealth redistribution. They don't want to throw that out there. But wealth redistribution is exactly what cap and trade laws are designed to accomplish. The government will set a cap on the amount of carbon emissions that an industrialized nation can emit. If the limit is exceeded, carbon credits can be purchased from underdeveloped nations who have more credits than they need. It's wealth redistribution. And you got to remember, though, we've proven many times conclusively that CO2 emissions have nothing to do with global warming. Global warming fear-mongering is simply a scheme put together by global elites to redistribute the wealth of the world and move us into world government. Now, I've got all this in the back of my mind when I'm sitting here watching this town hall last night, and I'm going, you've got to be kidding me. And especially when you look at their new green deals that they're proposing. Very little of it, a small portion of the new green deal actually deals with global warming and climate change because they know they can't solve that. It's a complete, utter hoax. It's all propaganda coming from the United Nations to the nations around the world. And of course, Donald Trump has recognized that. And he's made fun of for it because he calls global warming, climate change a hoax. And he's actually the one in the right. So why is this prophetic? Well, the Bible prophesies a world government. Revelation 13, 1 through 2. The Bible says, "And I stood up on the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns. Upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. His feet as the feet of the bear, mouth as the mouth of the lion. And the dragon, Satan, gave him his power, his seat, and his great authority." This is a 2,000, now this is written in symbolism, I know, but this is a 2,000-year-old prophecy of the world government that is currently being established. And remember, they need an ongoing, this perpetual scare tactics to scare everybody into changing their lifestyle, even to the point where they want to tell you what you should be able to eat and how much you should produce and consume and everything else. This is the ongoing fulfillment of this prophecy. And I'm sitting there with this in the back of my mind watching this town hall last night and knowing that it's all propaganda. And so I wanted to bring it before you today. Now, I'll get off into some more of this and give you some proof that global warming is a scam when we get back.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter. This book by Irvin's grandson provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your relationship with God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at Endtime will help you find your purpose and eliminate fears. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real life change. Get your book for only $14.99. Call 1-800-363-8463 or go to endtime.com/move.
If ever people needed to hear the unvarnished truth, it is now. There are some subjects that are not politically correct to talk about, but they're urgent. That's why I'm grateful for Endtime magazine. If you're not a subscriber, you're missing information that will impact your life. Endtime has a bi-monthly magazine that explains how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. You can get a 2-year subscription for only $29. You can also get a bulk subscription and pass them out to your church. We have gotten reports that Endtime magazine has caused spiritual awakenings in churches when they see the prophecies being fulfilled right now. You can start your own ministry and leave them in doctor's offices, libraries, laundromats. You never know if you might be responsible for saving someone who is searching for the unvarnished truth. That's what the magazine has done in many lives. Call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 and get your subscription today.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archive button.
So I'll get more back into the what happened at the town hall last night with the CNN climate crisis town hall. But I got a quick announcement. This coming weekend, September 7th, Irvin Baxter is going to be teaching Satan's End Time Plan in Madison, Mississippi. Saturday night, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. He's going to be teaching, again, Satan's End Time Master Plan. And then Sunday morning, September the 8th, he's going to be teaching an updated Breaking Prophetic Fulfillments, followed by the Q&A session. And he's going to be at the Parkway Pentecostal Church, 601 Reunion Parkway. That's in Madison, Mississippi, 39110. So if you need more information on that, you can go to endtime.com. go into the events section and then conferences and check it out. And me and my wife will be going down there with Irvin and his wife, and we'd like to meet some of you new faces and then see some of the ones that we saw last year. And we've been going there every year for I don't know how many years now, probably 10 or 12 years. So look forward to seeing you guys down there this weekend. Now, global warming. Global warming is only one of the messages being used to force the nations of the world into a world government. It's getting the nations to yield up their sovereignty and to get them to bow to the edicts of this world governing body. All this stuff's coming from the United Nations, the Sustainable Development Goals. So anytime you hear global governance, the propaganda like Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, Sustainable Development Goals, nationalized health care, social justice, national identification programs, all of these things, think world government. These are all synonymous terms. But it is global warming, or should I say climate change, sorry about that, to be politically correct, which I'm not trying to be. That is presently the poster child being used to frighten everyone into giving up freedom in order to save the planet. Because you understand, global warming, which leads to climate change, is a hoax. The goal is not to save the planet. The goal is for them to govern the planet. It's absolute control with no means of resistance. Why would they want to take all of our guns? Absolute control with no means of resistance. Now, this is not a program today on gun control, but that's the goal of people. There are a select group of individuals on the planet today that want to govern everyone else. A very small group of individuals. They want to govern you, and they don't want you to have a means to resist. So why all this gun control and this, that, and the other? And I could get off into that. I won't today, but it's another issue that needs talked about. Now, do you remember, former governor of the state of Washington, Dixie Lee Ray, she probably summed it up best when she said, the objective clearly enunciated by the leaders of the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, she said that it's to bring about a change in the present system of independent nations. The future is to be world government with a central planning by the United Nations. Fear of an environmental crisis, whether real or not, is expected to lead to compliance. One of our governors of the United States said that. They're not really trying to hide it anymore. And compliance to a communistic world governing body is the goal, and the global warming, climate change scam, hoax, deception, whatever you want to say, is that perpetual life-threatening crisis that the United Nations has chose to get there. Folks, this is all very prophetic. The Bible says there's going to be a world government in the end time. We're watching the ongoing fulfillment of that as we speak. And, thankfully, for those who are paying attention, none of this is surprising. The Bible prophesies the establishment of this world government before the second coming of Jesus Christ. And, if you really are observing, watching the rapid rate at which these prophecies are being fulfilled, the second coming of Jesus Christ and the Battle of Armageddon cannot be very far off. All this is very prophetic. And I'm sitting there with this in my mind, watching this town hall last night, thinking, man, these guys are really pushing for this. And you got to think about that when it comes November of 2020. The election coming up in just about a year and a couple months now. I mean, do you want to go be sold right into world government? I mean, come on. It's what kind of country do you want to live in? And I'll get into that here in a second if I have time. According to CBS, most of these Democratic presidential candidates have the goal of achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. I mean, these guys are on a war against coal-fired power plants and things like that. And, although some of them aim to accelerate by a few years to 2040 or 2045, many of those candidates, they also hope to cut emissions by half by 2030, which, of course, that's leaning towards that's a nod to the Sustainable Development Goals. or to get net zero emissions for electricity by that year. So all candidates, this is very key when it comes to world government. All of the candidates last night have also pledged to rejoin the Paris Climate Accords, which was an international non-binding agreement from that President Trump withdrew the United States from when he took office. Now, I want you to, I'm gonna go over that one more time slowly. If elected, every candidate that was on the stage last night claims that they will rejoin the United States into the Paris Climate Accord. All of the Democratic presidential candidates are pro-world government. The Paris Climate Accord is all about global governance, folks. It was a very good thing when Donald Trump pulled us out. It would be a very bad thing for somebody to put us back into that. We do not want to support the world government any way, shape, or form. When Donald Trump pulled us out, I was so glad. I was doing cartwheels. You just couldn't see it. But now here I'm looking at every presidential candidate saying, hey, as soon as I get into office, we're going back into that. Many of them have said we're going back into the Iran deal and the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA. And I'm thinking, you know, this is becoming pretty easy on what I'm going to do next November. So let's talk about real quick the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement, because you need to understand that. Because every one of them Democratic candidates last night are going to put us back into this. So the Paris Climate Agreement, in a nutshell, really the Paris Climate Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals, they're really twin efforts designed specifically to govern the planet. One without the other is pointless. The Sustainable Development Goals, they were unanimously adopted by 193 members of the United Nations back in September of 2015. The Pope Francis his encyclical in, I think, June of that year was fully devoted to the support of these goals being adopted. The United Nations, it's their global governing plan, and it's called Transforming the World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It's global governance is what it is. And according to the United Nations, their own website, these 17 Sustainable Development Goals and 169 targets, it demonstrates the scale and ambition of this new universal agenda. And the Sustainable Development Goals are an effort by the United Nations to control every aspect of every person's life on the planet. One of the main areas of critical importance is the planet itself. According to this 2030 agenda, they say we are determined to protect the planet from degradation, including through sustainable consumption. I heard Kamala Harris last night say something about to abolish or to try to keep people from eating red meat. I mean, I don't know about you, the rest of you guys anywhere else, but here in Texas, that's never going to happen. So, sustainable consumption and production, sustainably managing its natural resources and taking urgent action on climate change so that it can support the needs of the present and future generations. Now, this is the reason for the Paris Climate Agreement. Without a commitment from every nation, the Paris Climate Agreement's the commitment, without a commitment from every nation to curb their greenhouse gas emissions, it's impossible to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Back on January of 2016, during his opening remarks at the Abu Dhabi Action Day, then UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, previous to the current one, he made the following statement. I'm quoting. He said, the Paris Agreement was adopted just after the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals were adopted in September 2015. The Paris Climate Agreement, December of 2015. He said, these are twin plans for transformative progress. Sustainable Development Goals are the vision. Climate change is the commitment. The vision and commitment should go hand in hand. They are part of a grand design, and these should complement each other. If we don't implement the climate change agreement, all these 17 goals will not be fully implemented. I'm totally fine with that. Now, you can understand the importance of Donald Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement in June of 2017. Trump said, therefore, in order to fully to fulfill my solemn duty to protect America and its citizens, the United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord. As of today, the United States will cease all implementation of the non-binding Paris Accord and the draconian financial and economic burdens. Remember, we had huge financial commitments, billions of dollars, and the agreement imposes on our country. He said this includes ending the implementation of the nationally determined contribution and, very importantly, the Green Climate Fund, which is costing the United States a vast fortune. So Donald Trump pulled us out. Very good thing, because it's a complete hoax. It's wealth redistribution. It's yielding up a lot of our sovereignty to this world government that's being created. But every Democratic candidate on the stage last night at the CNN town hall, they are all for putting the United States back into the Paris Agreement, and i.e. entering us back into that wing of the world government. And so now you can see the Bible prophesies a world government. I don't want to be a part of that. Do you? You got to ask yourself that question when you're watching these things. A lot of people just saw this as maybe another debate or something, a Q&A with some Democratic candidates. The CNN Climate Crisis Town Hall last night was so much more than that. I mean, it appears that one of those 10, if they were to beat Trump, could be the next president of the United States. And what kind of country do we want going forward? You need to ask yourself that question. Be educated on these issues. And of course, this is just one. You've got, globalism and all kinds of other ones you need to be careful of. So the global warming climate change hoax is propaganda by the United Nations and other globalists to scare the populace into complying to their edicts. You remember Al Gore's film, An Inconvenient Truth, back in 2006. And obviously we're in 2019 going towards 2020. Back in 2006, Al Gore's film, and a lot of people got scared to death because of this film. But it suggested, I'm going to hold right here. I know I'm coming up to a break. I want you to hear this, because a lot of people have looked back to Al Gore's film, An Inconvenient Truth, and have gotten some clarity on some of these issues. So it's very important we look into this, because he predicted so many things that were so false, because he was a huge investor in this stuff. He's made millions and millions of dollars off of this.
Many Christians admit end-time Bible prophecy is very complex and difficult to understand, and for some, a little bit scary. But what if you could understand Bible prophecy? What if you could know what will happen and how the United States will play a key role during end-time events? When you call today and get Understanding the End Time DVD curriculum, you can have peace about what is to come while understanding the prophetic events that appear in our headlines every day. When you call or go online to endtime.com and order, you'll learn the answer to the biggest prophecy question of all. Will the rapture take place, and when will it happen? This 14-part DVD series is the definitive end-time prophecy Bible study available. And for this limited time, you can get it for just $149. Don't miss this special offer. Understanding the End Time. Call now. 1-800-363-8463. That's 1-800-END-TIME. Or go to endtime.com today.
So Al Gore's film, An Inconvenient Truth, back in 2006, it suggested that the sea would rise up 20 feet in the near future as the ice in Greenland and western Antarctica melts. Well, of course, that hasn't happened. Those ice sheets have been melting and refreezing every summer and winter for years and years and years and hundreds and thousands of years. It's normal, everybody, but yet they want to use it to scare you into some kind of a compliance. They want to control you. It's what this is all about. Now, you understand, though, that President Obama was a huge supporter of global warming, which leads to climate change. But yet, Martha's Vineyard, they were supposed to be underwater in 10 years. So I have a question. Why did President Obama just purchase a $15 million oceanfront mansion in someplace up in the east? I can't remember. Martha's Vineyard. Why did he do that if the oceans are going to rise and kill us all? Has anybody not told the Obamas we have only 10 years until the world ends due to climate change? I mean, don't they realize that their house is soon going to be underwater? This $15 million mansion that they purchased? I'm being facetious. But still, Obama was one of the main proponents of this stuff. And if he really believed it, you wouldn't want to buy a house anywhere near the ocean, right? Because it's going to raise 10 or 20 feet. Martha's Vineyard was supposed to literally be going on to be swallowed by the ocean. And if we don't hand over all of our money and freedom to the government to stop global warming, that's what was going to happen. But yet one of the main proponents of it, our recent president, just bought a $15 million house out there right on the front. His yard goes right off into the ocean. Why would you do that if it was going to get swallowed up? I don't know. Just a question I thought I'd pose. It's Thursday, and I'm feeling good today, so I feel good every day. But moving on. So commentary. This is a great article. Listen at this. Global warming or bad data. If you put garbage data in, you're going to get garbage data out. Now, let's get into some specifics, because when you talk to a leftist or a person that is a supporter of this, they very seldom ever give good science behind it. They talk about their plan to stop it and all this other, but there's very little science behind it. Or if they do put out the science by the International Panel on Climate Change, that stuff has been proven time and time again to be doctored, because those scientists are bought and paid for. So you can't rely upon that. So we need to rely on good science. Al Gore likes to say that the science of climate change is settled. But of course, science, almost by definition, is never settled. You're all the time trying to, what's the new thing I can learn, and this, that, and the other. And climate science has always suffered from the problem of shaky and missing data. A study by a meteorologist, Anthony Watts, he found that almost 90% of the 1,221 weather stations in the United States did not meet the National Weather Service's setting standards, which requires that they be at least 100 feet from any artificial heat source or radiating surface. To deal with this defective information, climate scientists have adjusted the data to solve that problem. I mean, invariably, these adjustments have been made earlier data show lower temperatures, and recent temperatures show higher ones. So to develop reliable data, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration placed 114 state-of-the-art weather stations relatively evenly spaced about the lower 48 states. And they were carefully sited to be away from urban areas, which are heat islands, airports, which can be affected by jet exhaust, etc. And the system became operative in 2005. Well, now RealClearEnergy.com is reporting that there has been no increase in average temperature in the continental United States over the last 14 years. And as measured by these new stations. So, you've got people that are saying every day the thing's heating up and we're all going to burn up and all this other stuff. But over the last 14 years, temperatures haven't risen at all. If anything, overall temperatures are slightly cooler than they were. And furthermore, studies have shown that the U.S. CO2 emissions, get this, are down to where they were in 1985, a third of a century ago. No other industrial country has come anywhere close to reducing their emissions by so much. So what Donald Trump is saying is true. We've been working on it, and it is working. But yet people that want to keep this propaganda going, I mean, go back and watch some of the videos last night of that, the CNN Climate Crisis Town Hall. And they're acting like if we don't do something in the next 6, 8, 10 years, the earth's going to burn up and it's an existential threat and it's going to be irreparable. And you know what, folks? It's simply a hoax. There's no truth to it at all. And you know, you've heard of the what's up with that. They wrote an article, The Polar Ice Melt Myth. And that's all it is a myth. This was in May of this year. They said, according to the National Snow and Ice Data Center, ice, you know, because Al Gore said that those polar caps and things were going to be gone within a decade or a little over a decade. Gone. And if you look at them today, they're nowhere near being gone. According, like I said, according to the NSID, ice currently covers 6 million square miles, or 1/10 of the land area on Earth. About the area of South America, we've got an ice sheet, the area of South America. And floating ice or sea ice, alternatively called pack ice, at the North and South Poles, it covers 6% of the ocean's surface. So an area similar to about North America. So the most important measure of ice is its thickness. Antarctica and Greenland combined represent 99% of all the ice on the Earth. The remaining 1% is in glaciers, ice sheets, and sea ice. So Antarctica can exceed 3 miles in thickness. Now think about that. An ice sheet, 3 miles in thickness. And Greenland, 1 mile. And if they were to melt, sea level would indeed rise over 200 feet, according to this science. But not even the most radical alarmists suggest that possibility arising due to the use of fossil fuels. It's a hoax. All this stuff you're hearing, hoax, hoax, hoax. You got to remember, there's an agenda driving this. However, the ice that flows off of the Antarctic and Greenland, called shelf ice, it represents only 0.5% of all the Earth's ice, which is melted. And if that's the case, it would raise the sea level about 14 inches. Not a big deal. And although sea ice covers 6% of the entire ocean at an average thickness of 6 feet, were it all, get this, were it all to melt, sea levels would rise 4 inches. And if we melted all 200,000 of the Earth's temperate zone glaciers, sea levels would rise another 2 feet. So total catastrophe can only occur if we melted the Antarctic and Greenland. But the Antarctic is the coldest place on the Earth. At coolantarctica.com, calculations show the temperature would have to rise 54 degrees Fahrenheit to start the warming of that ice cap. It's not going to happen. Al Gore predicted in 2007 that by 2013, the Arctic Ocean would be completely ice-free. That's 6 years ago, almost 7 years ago. Never happened. Satellite images taken every day at the poles since 1981 show that between summer and winter, regardless of the degree of summer melting, the ice, the sea ice, completely recovers its original size in the winter. The winter before almost every year since the pictures were taken. So it thaws in the summer, it refreezes in the winter. It's been doing that since 1981. And the sea ice has been stubbornly resistant to Al Gore's predictions, obviously. And in fact, the average annual coverage of sea ice has been essentially the same since satellite observations began in 81. So, you know, however, that has not stopped the global warming advocates of even government agencies from cherry-picking the data to mislead the public. All you got last night in the town hall, the CNN town hall, was it's an existential threat and it's coming to kill us all, and you know, we need to go from electric cars to, or from gas and diesel cars to electric cars and all this other stuff. It's a hoax, everybody. They just want to control your life. And the solution to public fear about ice melting and sea levels rising is simply to use common sense. That's all there is to it. And so there you have it. If you go to the CNN, the videos on YouTube, the CNN town hall, the climate crisis town hall, and you watch that. I wanted to bring it before you today because I know a lot of people probably watched that last night. And I got to be honest with you. I heard an interview with Bernie Sanders and a guy named Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan is a YouTuber and this, that, and the other. And I watched an interview with Bernie Sanders. And what Bernie Sanders sounds, what he said on Joe Rogan's interview, it sounded kind of normal. And he sounded like a kind of normal guy. And I thought, if I didn't know what I know and have studied this stuff, if I'm just, a guy out here watching or a lady watching this stuff, then I would think, he's got some pretty good points here. But at the end of the day, if you know the agenda behind all of this, Bernie Sanders is a democratic socialist. It's all built around socialistic principles. The bad part of that is the Bible says the Antichrist kingdom in the end time is going to be socialistic. Now, I obviously don't have time to finish and to prove all that to you, but the Bible says in Revelation 17:3 that John saw a woman, the woman in Revelation 17 is the false church. She was riding on a scarlet-colored, seven-headed, ten-horned beast. The scarlet color represents socialism in the end time. I know it takes a lot for me to prove that. You go look into the Revelation chapter 6 and the four seals. One of the horses is red. It's a red ideology, the red spirit in the end time. But if you go look at all that, the end time world government of the Antichrist is going to be socialistic. When you look behind Bernie Sanders and an Ocasio-Cortez or a Liz Warren or all of these people, they're pushing. Go look at their new Green Deal plans. Go to their websites. Look through Bernie Sanders' new Green Deal plan. You'll see socialism all through it. And that's what you got to look at when you look at this stuff. A socialistic one world governing body prophesied about 2,000 years ago, and here we are watching individuals running for the President of the United States pushing socialistic principles of wealth redistribution in these hoax, this propaganda of global warming, which leads to climate change. Know your issues, folks.
This has been End of the Age, brought to you by the faithful partners of Endtime Ministries. If you're not currently a partner with Endtime Ministries, or if you would like more information, we invite you to call us at 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463, or visit us online at endtime.com.
Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page.